of the Los Angeles City Council. My name is Marquis Harris Dawson. I'm the chair of the committee and council member for the 8th District. I'm joined by fellow committee members Kern Price of the 9th District and Mike Bonin of the 11th District. We'll begin the meeting with our public comment. I have someone named Alan who has 4 cards, so Alan will get to speak for 3 minutes and his general public comment. So, Alan going once.
Presidente.
Going twice.
Presidente, see, I'm right here, Mr. Dawson.
Just to clarify with respect to the 1 minute it is.
Yeah, madam, I know my 1 minute. I know my time. I've been coming to City Hall.
Hold on. You'll get
Clarify
an
the
explanation.
1 minute is per item and also 1 minute for general public comment.
That's what the gentleman said. 3 minutes an agenda item and public comment 1 minute. Total 4 minutes, ma'am. I know how to count. Where do you think I'm from? Watts? Girl, come on. You all know what's happening with the homeless population in Los Angeles. But it's going to change. I'm going to make America good for all the homeless. Because when I write my declaration to DOJ in the investigation of why so many homeless people still sit in our sidewalk and streets and can't sleep in their cars and RVs and large vehicles, Mike Bonin is sure to know that his name will be on the affidavit when he needs to sign up and say, why didn't I listen to that gentleman, Mr. Herman, for the record, who supports Trump? Because the Republicans are tired of you Democrats taking advantage of the homeless. We're really sick and tired of all this crap. And so when it comes to item 1, as I told Mr. Weezer, the report relative to the comprehensive of homelessness strategy, none submitted. That's the reason why you see homeless people on the goddamn street. And what about item 2 now? Major relative appointment of Michael Canine, or Camine, whatever the hell his name is. But can he do the job? Hillary Clinton couldn't do her job. That's why all you cried last night at 10 o'clock when I rode in on my red pony. Now going to item number 3. This is a long one because it deals with the budget man, Krikorian, known as the GOAT. And Miss Nuri Jury, who soon will be investigated thoroughly by the FBI. But the relative pilot program that you're talking about to combine rapid rehousing, well, let me explain. You gave out vouchers to people who can't live in a house. Those vouchers are inadequate. The money does not comply with the rent stabilization formula, fools. So get your shit together and give out real vouchers. A voucher of maybe like $3,500 to get you into a rental location in LA off of Broadway Fiesta, so we can run around with all those poor-ass Democrats who are crying down there. Because we're sick and tired of living on the goddamn street. We're sick and tired of not having jobs or inventing a new way of creating jobs like Hillary promised. And all you Democrats now are called losers in 5th place to the supervisor's seat like Mr. Englander of the 12th District. That's why he didn't show up for a public meeting today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. It appears that we have 3 items today. We'll begin with item number 1.
Yes, sir. Item number 1 is a Homeless Strategy Committee report relative to the Comprehensive Homeless Strategy Quarterly Performance Report for the first quarter of fiscal year 2016-2017.
Excellent. Thank you. We have no speaker cards on this, so I'll use this as an opportunity to, before we get this report from the Strategy Committee, which we're very excited about, just want to thank everybody who helped us do the work to put HHH before the voters, all the staff, all the attorneys, all the folks who did research, and all the folks who talked to friends and neighbors and put out a good opinion about it. we want to thank you, and I think the voters of Los Angeles thank you as well, because they responded so overwhelmingly positively to it. And so we are excited about that and excited about what we'll be able to do about homelessness in the near term. And so without anything further, I want to recognize that Jose Huizar of District 14 has joined us. And now we'll hear from Miguel Santana representing the Homelessness Strategy Committee.
Good afternoon, and I also say congratulations to all of you for your tremendous leadership in not only in putting HHS before the voters, but also in shepherding through this comprehensive process. Today, we have our first quarterly report on the homeless comprehensive strategy that was adopted within this calendar year. And we have with us Meg Barclay, who, as you know, is our homeless coordinator, whose first job was to put this report together and to ensure that we are keeping track of each one of the strategies and the progress that we're making. In just a very short period of time, so when you think about the context of this issue, the city has identified nearly over $2 billion worth of ongoing revenue, of which 1.2 was just approved yesterday, and an additional amount will be considered by your council through a nexus study for affordable housing. Beyond that, there's been significant work being done on implementing both the short-term and long-term strategies that your council approved, and we continue to work in coordination with the County of Los Angeles. The CLA and my office meet regularly with our counterparts at the county and ensure that the strategies that are being implemented both on the county and the city side are being done concurrently, and as we move forward, the lessons that we learn, we share with each other. So with that, I'll turn it over to Meg, who will walk you through sort of the highlights of the report, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Good afternoon. Meg Barclay, City Homeless Coordinator at the CAO's office. As discussed, I'm just going to walk through the report briefly and then we can take questions. As discussed in the report, the countywide, there are 48,874 homeless people in the full county, and 43,454 of those are in the Los Angeles County Continuum of Care, which includes the City of Los Angeles.
This is the number because somebody just wants to hear, correct?
Yes. It's according to the annual point-in-time counts. That's right. 65% of persons experiencing homelessness in the LA Continuum of Care live in the City of Los Angeles. 26,000 of those are unsheltered. The vast majority are unsheltered, and 31% are chronically homeless. Clearly, we are experiencing a crisis, as is recognized by this committee and the council and the mayor when the strategy was adopted. Which I didn't flip the slide. The second slide in the presentation just presents a figure that sort of schematically represents the scale of the effort that the city can expect to see over the course of the implementation of this strategy. As we move from this crisis situation that we're experiencing towards something more stable, towards kind of recovery from the crisis, as the analogy goes. The red triangle in the drawing sort of represents the scale of the effort towards crisis response sorts of efforts, which are what we're doing now. Largely, a lot of the work that we're doing to implement programs are related to crisis type of responses, establishing new facilities, emergency beds, things like that. We're also establishing an infrastructure for the longer-term solution, which is really more housing being available, things that will facilitate greater and faster construction of new housing as well. That's the yellow triangle. And then creating these systems to support ongoing largely will be in some scale. We will need these even as we get to the recovery situation, things like the coordinated entry system, things to ensure that folks, as they might experience homelessness, are able to get housed again as quickly as possible, and we don't end up building the population that we're seeing now again. But over time, as the graphic is intended to illustrate, as more housing becomes available, we'll shift our efforts. Our work will focus more on those long-term recovery efforts, we will need less of those crisis response types of services. As more people become housed, the number of persons experiencing homelessness is expected to go down. Excuse me. So going into just a presentation of the status of where we are and what the work that's been done since the strategy was adopted. The CAO procured to get a sense of the work it was going to take to implement the strategy, the CAO procured a web-based project management system, and the leads of all 64 strategies have entered project plans to implement their strategies in the system, and the progress is being tracked on a monthly basis for all of the strategy leads. As it relates to those crisis response types of services, those things that were in the red triangle in the graphic on the second slide, the LASA has actually completed an RFP for the coordinated entry system, which I'll discuss a little more in detail later, but it includes new emergency shelter beds that are coming online, and those contracts went into effect last month. The sanitation department has also completed their encampment protocol, and work is being done to site new facilities, as we've discussed, but that's one of the areas that we're experiencing some challenges right now and delays, but we are working and learning and adapting as we go.
New facilities for?
Things like storage, the safe parking program was one of those things, or is one of those things, mobile showers, things like that. This next slide sort of talks more about our efforts to start to build the infrastructure for the sort of long-term recovery resources like the new housing units. Obviously, a big resource became available yesterday, which is very exciting. In addition to that, and we're very, definitely plans to implement that as soon as possible. Ongoing housing production at the Housing Community Investment Department has continued this quarter, and that includes new housing production of 326 affordable units, 131 of which are permanent supportive housing. 377 permanent supportive housing units are currently under construction, and HCID financed 488 units this quarter, and 255 of those are permanent supportive housing units. So production is continuing and can only expect it to go up from there as we implement HHH. LASA's program with the U.S. Veterans Affairs housed 1,688 veterans since February of this year, and 230 of the 430 households, sorry, that's 214, excuse me, of the 430 households housed with the city-funded rapid rehousing for adults and veterans, they were placed into permanent housing this quarter, or since that program began. The results of the RFQ that was done by these CAO are going to be announced next week, identifying a new group of developers that can be called upon to develop affordable housing on city-owned sites as they're identified for that purpose, which will streamline the process of getting new units online. As Miguel also mentioned, the linkage fee nexus study has resulted in an ordinance that's making its way through the planning process now. And then looking at that green rectangle in the graphic on slide 2, the systems of ongoing support, as I referred to before, LASA's coordinated intersystem RFP put out a significant amount of city resources that were allocated for homeless services. That RFP was completed in August, so the second month of this quarter that is addressed by this report so it was included in August. Those contracts went into effect in October, and those services should be being provided now. LAPD has implemented 4 new HOPE teams and trained 407 officers this quarter with mental health intervention training, 763 to date. And EWDD's LA RISE program has placed 200 of their goal of 275 homeless individuals in subsidized employment, with the goal of meeting that 275 goal by the end of December, and transitioning half of those to unsubsidized or competitive employment by the end of the fiscal year. So just really quick, next quarter's quarterly performance report, we're looking at, again, another update on the ongoing status of all of the strategies, and attachment 1 to the full report provides a little summary of the status of each strategy and next steps of all of the strategies in the comprehensive homeless strategy. We'll also be able to provide a report on budget expenditures to date for those funds that were allocated in the 2016-17 budget. And we're working on presenting the performance metrics for the strategy. As we move forward, how can we tell that we're being successful?
And to conclude, for next week, my office will be issuing 2 additional reports, as one, as Meg indicated, on the city properties that were identified for housing, where we will be recommending a list of potential developers, not just for those 12, but for any future sites that become available, and recommending which one should move forward for those specific sites. And we're also issuing a report on how do we implement HHH. We've been optimistic over the last few weeks, working on a program to try to move forward as quickly as possible. And so Yolanda Chavez is here, who could certainly give your committee a preview as to what that's likely to look like.
Excellent questions, colleagues. Mr. Price?
Just pleased with the progress we're making. And I think these metrics will be very important so that we can sort of track where we are. But just a question. So how has, we got a lot of criticism about the expenditure for police-related services in conjunction with, how are we tracking those expenditures in terms of those activities that the police are doing, or still doing? How do we sort of quantify that level of support?
Expenditures of the police department?
Yeah,
funds?
so as a year ago, my office issued a report indicating that the city spends over $100 million on homeless-related activities, of which we identified most of that actually going towards law enforcement. And so we haven't done an update in the report, but we would expect that activity would probably look the same. And so the change in what was recommended in the strategy that you adopted, that the interface between law enforcement and the homeless community be changed so that it provides an opportunity to be helpful and to gear them into a program such as a coordinated entry system, but also in providing training to those officers so that they're better able to handle difficult situations through the training that's offered to them. And so the HOPE program is already intended for that. So we could certainly continue to provide an update as to how the expenditures are working. I wouldn't recommend doing that in the short term because the difference would probably not look too different. But rather, as we think about the performance metrics, one of those metrics could be changing that relationship between law enforcement and the homeless community, and how does that get represented in terms of the budget itself?
Yeah. How you measure that?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the exercise we'll be going through with the strategy leads to identify those metrics.
Mr. Huizar?
For this update, and I am looking forward to the implementation plan for HHE and get more details on that and move that forward. I think the public sentiment is that with the passage of HHH, the expectation is some immediate changes, which is not going to happen overnight. And but if we could expedite that and move that as quickly as possible, the better. I think that's the biggest piece in terms of the city moving forward on our comprehensive strategic plan. So we have to ensure that at least our biggest piece in this response to homelessness is moving as expeditiously as possible. And it's great to have these quarterly reports. I think that one of the ways we could continue to not only update this committee and council and the mayor and all of us of the progress is to also have some type of informational sheets about how do we keep the public informed about the progress that we've made, because the more people see and are aware of what progress is being made by the city, I think the more people buy into the plan and want to enlist in helping. Something that HHH taught us throughout the city in the campaign, that people really want to do something, and so they just don't know what's happening. What are we doing? And if we inform people in a very public way about what the city is doing, I think we'll enlist a lot more people to help and find people to help in our implementing our strategic plan. So thank you for this, and I look forward to ongoing discussion. I do have some questions with respect to like some storage units, et cetera, and bathrooms in my district, but I'll forward those to you directly and
Yes.
have those discussions and see how we could work together on some of those items that were raised. Thanks.
And in response to the question or the value on informing the public, we are also looking at the CAO's website has a page for the strategy, and we're looking at ways to make that more accessible and have more easy to find information on the status of all of the 64 strategies, so that because as you've seen, there's a couple of recommendations in here to amend strategies. So as the strategies do evolve, you could get to a current version of what the strategies are, how they're currently being implemented.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huizar. Mr. Bonin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll echo everybody's comments. Thank you. Again, welcome on board. Welcome back,
Thank you.
really. And thank you all for the work on this. I'm going to apologize for not having been able to spend as much time with this over the past few days as I would have liked.
You're a little busy.
And I will, I'll spare the rest of the committee sitting here and going through each of these one by one, but I do want to go through them one by one, so I do want to set up a time and go through literally every single one of them. Unless you'd prefer I do it now. I did have a couple questions, though. One thing I wanted to sort of flag right off the bat is something that I brought up a few times, and Mr. Huizar mentioned when we were developing the comprehensive homelessness strategy, is shared housing. I see here for 7P, it's listed as study shared housing programs, and the next steps are LASA will hire a consultant to further study best practices. The study and the report on shared housing will be completed in May of 2017, and LASA will then award 2 shared housing pilot projects. To me, I don't get that. That's so far out. There's so much red tape and process in that. I've got an agency in my district right now, SHARE, a Self-Help and Recovery Exchange, that I've mentioned a few times, that has beds today. They have beds today, and I have them sit with the agencies in my district to try to make matches. And I'm presuming that there are resources like this around the city, and I don't know why we would be waiting months. I mean, if there are beds available today, I'd like us to be moving on that, like, soon.
So is there someone here from LASA?
You feel free to come forward and shine a bit more light on this matter. Just identify yourself. Thanks.
Good afternoon, council members. Paul Duncan, Associate Director of Systems Integration at LASA. So 7P called for a study of shared housing. So we were looking at it based on coming up with a study around what could ultimately be the large impact of doing shared housing. So we are in the process of really studying what the full impact is, as well as we've gotten some money from the Hilton Foundation specifically to set up a pilot with two different agencies. Outside of that, we are encouraging our rapid rehousing providers to look at shared housing opportunities and to partner with agencies like SHARE. SHARE has been funded through our coordinated entry system to provide support in finding shared housing opportunities. Shared housing is a big part of a lot of the services that are happening with our youth, as well as our single adults. The way we were reading that specific strategy was specifically around a study of it, not that we aren't continuing to try to implement it in other ways. The report was just reflecting the study side of it.
Yeah, I think you're reading too much into the word study. It was do it and study how to do more of it. So could you, could Lhasa break down for me on a quarterly basis how many people are being housed through shared housing, broken down by spa?
We can work to get that report. It's not something that's tracked in our data system, but we can speak to our partners and get a sense of, on a quarterly basis, how many people are actually entering shared housing. Our data system does not distinguish rental housing, whether it's shared or rental by itself.
Okay, I'd like to find a way to track that because I think it's, in many cases, it's an easy way to get someone who doesn't have a tremendous number of barriers into housing. I'm concerned that we don't have a mechanism to effectively track the success of it once folks are in there, but I want to get a handle on how much we're doing.
All right.
Okay, thank you. My second question was, and I apologize for skipping around, was on the next to the last page of your PowerPoint, Meg, where under the coordinated entry system, it said that there's 250 year-round crisis housing beds. Is that all 250 for new crisis, or is that just, how does that compare to a year ago?
Yes, those are new beds. Lasa's nodding. Yeah, those were new beds. The RFP called for new beds.
So this isn't the total number. This is
the new ones. On top of, so what's the total number? Do you have that? We can get that to your staff.
okay. So what I'm looking for on stuff like this is whether it's the year-round crisis housing beds or the number of housing navigation clients. It's nice to know what the number is, but I'd like to also know what the goal is and the timeline. I'm hopeful that, assuming that much of the housing that is going to be funded by what we got approved yesterday isn't going to come online in the next week or the next 6 months, is that these numbers dramatically escalate over time. And I'd like to see what the plan is for that. Because if we're looking at 28,000 people, 254 is really, really inadequate. And I want to see what our plan is to ramp up so we get that unsheltered population that you talked about down.
Yeah. So we'll definitely look into that for when we come back on the metrics.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, having goals and timeline projections would be helpful because we're going to be going from, well, initially we're going to be going from few crisis to more crisis, and then eventually, hopefully, back down to few because we've got the housing online and we don't need that.
Going back just really quick, going back to 7P, would you like to amend that to make that an actual, to implement shared housing in addition to looking at the effectiveness of the model? Just to clarify the strategy?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I know it's being done in some cases. I'd like to know how much and how successful it is. Honestly, it's not the model a lot of agencies are used to, and so there's some reluctance to use it because it's not the model. And there are cases, and this is something, Lhasa, for your study on it, where some folks have been reluctant to take shared housing because for them it may not be, some folks are offered shared housing and that's their permanent situation, and that's great. Some folks are living on the street and they may have a voucher and they're waiting to be placed, and occasionally Share has offered them shared housing in the interim so that they're not on the street, not on cold pavement at night. And there's been some issue about whether or not by accepting the shared housing voucher or the shared housing, they're no longer homeless and they lose their voucher. And if we have a system that actually disincentivizes someone from having a temporary place to stay while we're looking for a permanent place to stay, that's something we want to get a legislative fix on, either at the federal or the county level, wherever it needs to be. And I thought I had one more. No, but let's just set aside a couple hours and we'll go through the whole thing.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mr. Bond. And I'll just close with a couple questions. First, inasmuch as we had a robust discussion today in council regarding parking and dwelling in automobiles, You made reference to developing a safe parking program during your presentation, even though it's not necessarily on the PowerPoint. Could you verbalize as much as you possibly can for the public where we are in that process? You know, what else needs to be done? What are the major roadblocks?
I believe there's actually staff here who can report on that with more authority than I.
Good morning, Councilman Committee. Jason Klein, Office of the City Administrative Officer. We've been working since June 2016 on a framework for the Safe Parking Program. The 8502 ordinance actually becomes the framework for any safe parking program the city would like to administer. What we've been doing is actually utilizing multiple agencies, Department of City Planning, Los Angeles Police Department, the Fire Department, Bureau of Engineering, Department of Transportation, our office, the Chief Legislative Analyst. We've been working on ways to actually identify where homeless individuals are actually dwelling in their vehicles and how we can actually provide services to those individuals. So one of the things we've been doing is actually building base maps for the entire city. What we did is we actually have base maps for each of the 21 community area stations where we've designated where they would actually be able to lawfully vehicle dwell between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. in the identified industrial and commercial zones. We presented that framework to the Homeless Strategy Committee, and we're looking for bringing that forward once a 8502 ordinance has been adopted, with recommendations on how we could expand the safe parking program to allow for safe parking potentially not only in those areas, but in designated city parking lots and public parking lots throughout the city. The goal is to actually have LAHSA and their service providers actually go out to these individuals and actually collect data, do the VSPDAT, find out what this population looks like. We don't have any good data. We know by looking at the Santa Barbara model and the San Diego model, a lot of these individuals are actually the working poor, people who make at or just above the minimum wage. They're working at Starbucks, they're working at McDonald's. They can't afford to live here in the city. They don't want to live in the surrounding, Lancaster, Palmdale, and community of the city 2 hours a day to, make minimum wage and then go home. So what they're doing is they're living in their vehicles in and around the areas that they actually work. Now, one of the things we want to do is figure out how we can best service those individuals. And since we don't have data, it's hard to actually come here and recommend programs. And, Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas actually worked with a nonprofit agency to actually have 4 teams go out and actually do the VSPDAT for 3 consecutive days. They identified 61 vehicles. They were able to get 35 people to actually participate in that program. What we did find is a lot of them were working poor. Most of them would be eligible for either rapid rehousing vouchers and or affordable housing programs. Only a small percentage actually required permanent supportive housing. That helps influence the decisions and bring forward a program to you. So basically, we need to do the same thing for the city of Los Angeles. Unfortunately, our problem is a lot larger. We have over 450 square miles throughout the city. The last homeless count identified over 3,900 vehicles throughout the city. Every single council district is impacted by this. The vehicles move on a day-to-day basis. We basically have to build task force to be able to go out there at a time where these vehicles are actually being dwelled in to actually make contact with these individuals and try to provide them assistance. And we as staff have to look for ways to actually encourage them to actually be willing to accept doing the VSPDAT and actually reaching out for help. We also want to be able to utilize the limited resources we have to identify areas where we can put in porta potties and mobile showers, be able to get service providers out there to provide them assistance if they do need it. And since we don't have a lot of information, we have to actually start with collecting that information so that we bring forward a good program.
Excellent, thank you. Did you have something you want to add, Meg? No? Okay.
Follow up on that?
Follow up?
Just how much data do you need? There's an estimated 4,000 people living in their cars. How many do you need to survey in order to craft a program?
We're working on a model for 2 pieces. One is doing a limited pilot program of actual lots where we could actually provide a full range of services to individuals. And then the other strategy is to actually go out and do the assessment of all of the individuals who are out there. So the expectation is it could take multiple years to actually be able to make contact to build the baseline of what this population of homeless looks like. But in the meantime, we actually do want to be able to start expanding on an off-street safe parking program and actually providing, housing navigation and services.
What data do you need? What steps remain before you can do what you describe as a pilot program?
The first step is actually bringing forward the safe parking program to the committee and then getting instruction for LAHSA to actually allocate a specific amount of the $700,000 that's been allocated in their budget for a safe parking program and a specific program of how those services would be rendered. Because the money is...
I'm sorry, Mr. Bond.
Go ahead.
So the allocation that's been made is not sufficient? It sounds like that's what you're saying?
The allocation that's been made, split between safe parking and mobile showers, LAHSA says that they could actually provide full services similar to what Santa Barbara provides for 25 to 50 vehicles. So if we were actually looking at providing a larger range of services, you're looking at having about $7.5 million dedicated to that program.
And one question, I don't need to answer it right now, but I'd like answered is that price tag per vehicle you just discussed, I'd like to know how that compares to the price tag per vehicle in Santa Barbara. Because that sounds really high to me. The other is I'm still unclear. What data are you waiting on, or do you need no more data to do the pilot program? It's just those remaining legislative budgetary steps that you outlined?
It's for getting the pilot program up and running, it's just going to be the legislative steps and the allocation of funds and then actually hiring individuals to actually operate the pilot program. And then on a go-forward basis, it's actually doing the VSPDAT, figuring out what the acuity for this population is, and then bringing that data forward to help frame, an ongoing program.
Given how long it's going to take you to do that, to me it seems unreasonable to have to do a VI SPDAT for everybody we can possibly identify living in a vehicle before we can craft a program. I think we can extrapolate from some of the data we have what the framework for a program should be, and we can change or modify as we go along. But to have to do that kind of extensive individual assessment before we come up with a framework of a program, it just sounds like something we don't do for anything else.
We'll be bringing forward a framework for an actual safe parking program that would provide the full range of services, but the California Environmental Quality Act requires us to do the analysis for the environmental impacts, and it does require that data analysis, and that data we don't actually have for this population of individuals.
I get that, but what I'm saying is I don't think that requires us interviewing every single person in a vehicle. And the reason I'll argue that, and I'll argue that it's not required by CEQA analysis, is we impose specific plans. We're talking about rezoning for mansionization, and we're not canvassing every single homeowner in an area in order to do a rezoning for the entire city for mansionization standards.
The goal isn't to actually necessarily touch base with everybody to build the database. It's to touch base with as many people as possible so that we have a robust database.
And how big a sample would that be, do you think?
What was done for Rancho Dominguez was about 50%. And I mean, theirs was significantly less than our population. But, it's not necessarily building the entire database over the period of time. And the first part of CES is actually doing the VSPDAT. So as the program expands and as more people come into the program, as more people are either participating in on-street or off-street parking, people are going to go through that assessment. So, in a good year, maybe we get 300 to 500 people in year one with actually providing a full range of services for about 10% of those individuals.
You said the data you would need is 15% or 50%?
The data other people have used is 50. For our argument, it would probably be between 10 and 20%, which will give us between 300 and 600 vehicles.
Thank you. It's incredible. The idea of talking to as that large a proportion of the population seems very, very valuable. It also seems like we might not ever get to our program, so I think it requires some more discussion offline on that. So thank you. I want to move, even though I have some more questions, we'll figure out a time to come back to it. I think we've got, gentlemen, about 15 minutes of quorum left, so we want to roll. So if there's no objection, we will approve this item and go on to item number 2. Mr. Clerk?
Yes, sir. Item number 2 is a communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Mitchell Kamin to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority for the term ending June 30, 2017.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Oh.
You're on.
Oh, okay. I'll share a little bit about myself. But let me start by saying I'm truly honored by this appointment and for the chance to help out with what I think we all agree is a crucial time in this homelessness crisis in our city. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm a second-generation native Angelino, graduate of Hamilton High School. I've been a practicing attorney for about 22 years. I'm currently a partner at the law firm of Covington and Burling, where I am a commercial litigator. But I've spent more than half my career in public interest, including 4.5 years in New York City at the Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem, and about 7.5 years as the CEO of Betsedec Legal Services in Los Angeles. I also, for just under 2 years, chaired the HACLA Board of Commissioners, and so have a great deal of concern and some relevant experience that I'd be happy to bring to bear for the LASA Commission. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I know you have my material.
Very exciting. Thank you so much for making yourself available and your willingness to serve our city in this very, very important capacity. Are there any questions from committee members for the appointee? No? Well, hearing no questions, well, thank you for your presentation. And Mr. Clerk, with no objection, we will approve this item. And you're all set.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Item number 3.
Yes, sir. Item number 3 is a motion by Council Members Krikorian, Harris Dawson, Martinez, relative to a pilot program that combines rapid rehousing vouchers and transitional social enterprise jobs through LA Rise into one link program.
Good afternoon again, council members. Paul Duncan with LASA. So this motion partners 2 of our rapid rehousing providers with two of the community partners identified through LA Rise. So within the San Fernando Valley, it would partner Chrysalis and LA Family Housing, basically bringing together the resources of the supported employment program through LA Rise and the rapid rehousing assistance through LA Family Housing to basically make sure that homeless individuals that are being identified for employment opportunities have supportive, stable housing readily available to them with support to quickly access that housing so that they can long-term be successful in their housing opportunities. In South LA, it's partnering Goodwill and Hopix, who is a part of Special Services for Groups, SSG. So this is a great opportunity to solidify a partnership that makes sense. On both areas, people should be linked together for these resources. So we're excited to see this solidified partnership, and we see it as a pilot that should be successful and be expanded in the future as well.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. So Donnie Brooks with the Department of Economic and Workforce Development, and I'm also the project manager for LA Rise. So this pilot, LA Rise, represents an $8 million investment, $6 million federal funds. There's a 5-year grant that's being evaluated, and through the budget through 16-17, there was another $2 million set aside to serve additional participants. The $6 million investment is a random control trial study. The additional $2 million that we receive allows us to serve more participants without subjecting them to random assignment, which is great. So what this pilot will do is leverage that funding set aside in the general fund to serve 25 participants in Councilmember Krikorian's district and Councilmember Harris Dawson's district, so a total of 50. LA Rise is primarily an employment services program that partners social enterprise businesses with our workforce development system. There's paid work experience, and we transition individuals we recruit primarily homeless individuals. We transition them to bridge employers. These are unsubsidized, competitive jobs in the open labor market. So we're excited to partner through this pilot. The council member, Krikorian and Harris Dawson, want to see us lean on the rapid rehousing, short-term rental assistance to provide more housing stability with this employment services program. And we believe that will ensure more retention once individuals are placed. So today we're asking that you accept the pilot and that we will also, the departments will be reporting back outcomes as we track, all of our retention, our placement, to study, the effects of this pilot program.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Any questions or comments, members? Yes, sir.
This is a pretty exciting effort. So tell me how the partners, you mentioned that a number of the partners included, and I'm looking at HOPIC specifically because I know they serve the South LA area. How are they participating? Are they referring folks, or you're taking folks from there that they recommend, or what's the?
So SSG is our rapid rehousing provider in South LA. They will be providing services as far as how these participants are identified for the 25. We're really working with the providers, both on the LA Rise side as well as the rapid rehousing side, to come up with a system that works between the two partners. So it may be a referral from the rapid rehousing provider to the LA Rise provider, as well as vice versa. So it's to work together.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Others? All right, well, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Hearing no objection, we'll accept this item. And that leaves us with no business by my accounting. Confirm, Mr. Clerk.
Just for the record, Mr. Chair, for item number 3, the committee is approving the motion and the joint report, the November 4 joint EWDD and LASA report.
Chair concurs.
Yes. Thank you, sir. And that clears the desk. No more cards there. There are no more cards.
And there are no more cards. We're adjourned. Thank you all so much.
This is their